What's up, everyone? Welcome to our review of The Mandalorian, Episode 2. You can find us on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Anchor, and YouTube. And just as a reminder, this review will be mostly spoiler content, so this is your friendly warning to abort mission if you want to remain spoiler-free. So it's going to be a little bit different from our last episode, but we're going to have fun. All right, John. Let's do a little bit of a summary here.
So, Episode 2. We pick up basically where we left off, where the Mandalorian is leaving with Baby Yoda, gets back to his ship, realizes that the Jawas are tearing it apart, getting the parts, loading it up onto their sandcrawler, starts taking out a few of them with his gun, vaporizing a few of them.
Oh, yeah.
Pretty cool to see. Effects are all pretty good on that. Starts chasing after them when they're getting away, has some trouble, falls down, gets knocked out, wakes up, realizes he needs some help, goes and gets his friend, comes back and trades for the parts, realizes that he may need something else in exchange because what they want he can't give them. That's when he goes and has to face off against the Mudhorn to get the egg, which you realize is just the regular Mudhorn egg.
Suka.
And that's how he gets off world, because eventually he gets his parts for his ship and is able to leave the planet and start taking the Baby Yoda back.
Yeah, and we see the Baby Yoda use Force powers.
Yes.
And before the Mandalorian makes it to his ship, he is intercepted by Transdoshans.
Yes.
With their spear like type of weapon, and he disintegrates one, and I guess they all have bounties still on the kid, so to kill him.
Yeah, which is crazy. So because we know that they've been sending other bounty hunters to go get this kid for a while now. We don't know exactly how long, but in the span of the Mando showing up, they've been sending him. They sent IG-11, and now they sent these Transdoshans that we know about. Transdoshans. So who knows how many others that have been? Who knows how many others that are out there just waiting for him to get close? I mean, they obviously really want this thing, and they're going to go to any lengths to get it.
Even die. Or get disintegrated.
Even dying.
So some of the new characters in this, we got a look at Jawas. They're not new to the cinematic universe, but they're new in this episode. We haven't seen them yet. And oh my goodness, I love the Jawas.
Yeah.
They are as mischievous, goofy, and just a hilarious hive mind that I need more of in my life.
I mean, we never really, even in previous movies, we haven't really seen much about them or like their lifestyle, anything that they do. We just know about them, the fact that they scavenge, that they drive this big sandcrawler thing, and that's pretty much been it for the general public.
They're the original Ewok.
Yeah.
Houdini!
Suga!
I love it. I love when they say that. And then the other character that was introduced was the Mudhorn.
Yeah.
So this is the creature.
Big rhino-like thing.
Big rhino, hairy rhino that the Mandalorian has to fight, which a lot of people online have been saying, like, oh, Mandalorians don't do well against horned creatures. Jango Fett got almost killed by the horned creature in Episode 2, the clone, Attack of the Clones.
Yeah.
And now we're seeing Pedro Pascal's character have to face off against one that nearly kills him. Mm-hmm. And it should have killed him if not for Baby Yoda protecting him. So that was a really cool design. I like that the egg was hairy, just like this creature. Yeah. I thought it was kind of an interesting and very alien design.
It's the subtle things like that.
Yeah, subtle things. So I think they nailed more Star Wars aesthetics in this episode with the characters they brought on.
Yeah. What's just kind of developing for me and kind of what I'm coming to realize about this show is that it's less about flash and like these big Star Wars set pieces that we've come to know and love, and more about like if you were a kid and you were given all of the B-list Star Wars toys, you couldn't have any of the Skywalkers, none of the Jabba's, none of the main character stuff, and you were just told to play with them, like this show would be what that would be about. where you have all these side characters that really haven't been given a lot of history or screen time in the past, and now they're becoming these big players in the series, and you're really getting to see more of them in action. And it's really interesting to me how they are using all these characters and really developing the world in such a different way. I've really enjoyed it so far.
Yeah, and and going to how they're interacting in the new worlds, like in these new characters. I love their interactions with each other, where it seemed very, very Star Wars. For after Nick Nolte, the Ugnaught helps the Mandalorian get all of his ship parts back, and then help him put it back together. And he has the time to. He's like, I can use a shipmate like you, and he's like, no, I don't think I will. I've been.
Spent a life in servitude, and now he's finally free.
And you are a guest in my valley. And I love that character dynamic that he had. I love the dialogue they had, and I love that the Mandalorian did what you would want to. It's like, offer this person a job. Like, yeah, I could use someone on my crew, dude. Like, thank you so much. And it's good to see the Mandalorian also grateful. And going back to the Mandalorian with his development in this episode, I actually enjoyed this episode more than the last one, despite it being shorter and having less world building content as far as introducing us to the Mandalorian, because it showed how like the Mandalorian was in a lot of fight situations. This felt more action packed and more of a tragedy, but a tragedy that's overcome by, the Mandalorian's tenacity to keep on fighting.
Like the stakes were bigger in a lot of ways.
Yeah, because he's alone. He's got the bounty with him. People are coming after him. So he's always in danger. He's not out of the woods, as compared to the last episode where he landed and he had to figure out how to ride a blurg. And then at the end, that's where we get the in danger moment. This one, there was a lot of uncertainty, which I very much enjoyed.
It definitely felt like in the first episode, he was more in control and more confident in every situation he went into, or he was able to pick up skills very quickly that he needed. But yeah, in this one, he was faced with things that were out of his control, that he really had to step out of his comfort zone to address and to overcome. And it felt like he came a long way, and now he's accepting more help from these other beings around him. His world is expanding with the idea that this small baby has these powers he's not really familiar with in a lot of ways.
Yeah, and along with that, he's going back to the baby. He's so protective of the baby. The way he's now got it on the controller, and so that when the Mudhorn goes after Baby Yoda, he moves it over.
Yeah,
with his with the controller on his wrist, and also when he gets cut by the Transdoshans, the Baby Yoda somehow leaps down from that that floating cradle and tries to like help him, and he has to get up, put the baby back in the spot, do it another time. And it's just so cute.
It almost makes me wonder if in some kind of like backstory flashback that we're going to see, if maybe the Mandalorian is a father, because he was acting very paternal in a lot of ways this episode, very protective of the young one, that he's not even, he doesn't have to bring it back alive, but he's choosing to, and he's choosing to put a lot of energy into protecting it. So I wonder what kind of other things are gonna spin off from this type of interaction and knowledge.
Or maybe he's protecting so he get that sweet Beskar armor. But you can't see a connection, and it's very enjoyable. It's so cute.
Oh yeah,
the Baby Yoda. And then it's contained still to the same planet. We're still on that planet with the Blurgs and Nick Nolte's Ugnaught. And what's great about this is you get to see more into the Jawa culture and how they have that moving fortress. And we've seen the inside of the moving fortress before with episode 4, where R2-D2 and C-3PO are just surrounded by scrap. And you see them walk to the front of the controller where there's a little pilot or whatever. And we got to see it again in The Mandalorian and see how tall he is compared to everyone bumping his helmet on top of some of the control panels. So it was really cool to see that again. And see him climb the fortress to get to the top, and then at the top there's just a bunch of them waiting for him, and they all shoot him off, which is really cool. I enjoyed seeing their different or the weapon that they used against R2-D2 also in episode 4. So it was more that that world building, but that continuation of canon that I really enjoyed a lot in this episode.
Definitely a lot of good callbacks.
Yeah. No, what are your final thoughts on the episode?
I'm excited that, like I said, I think I talked about this about the first episode, that they're pacing it really well. It doesn't seem rushed. It seems like it's good story building for me. I could see how maybe some people would find this a little slow, but
Like myself.
yeah, which, and I mean, it is a little slow right now. I would say that's something more of something that I enjoy, uh, knowing that this is going in a direction that's going to introduce a lot more characters down the road, because there's so many that we've seen in the trailers we haven't seen yet. It gives me more. It keeps raising more and more questions for me about what are the extents of the Baby Yoda's force powers. Is he going to turn him over, or is he going to give him to the client in order to get the Beskar steel that he needs, and then go back in later and maybe rescue the baby from whatever they're going to do with it? It asks just as many questions as it answers for me, and I find that really intriguing.
Yeah, and it definitely is with what they're building and the questions that are happening. With this, we weren't left on too much of a cliffhanger, except that, hey, he's gonna deliver. He's gonna deliver the baby. The question is now: is he going to, or is he not? And one of the things we were talking about before we started this is that you love the Baby Yoda and how it's entirely practical.
Yeah, no, I love the fact that there are some creatures that they are doing entirely CG, and I think that they could have gone with the CG route on this, but they're choosing to make it just like the Yoda, or just like Yoda from the original trilogy, where it's a puppet, it's all practical, and it's just that type of aesthetic and that feel that's so much more tangible that I really appreciate and like.
Yeah, and yeah, it's a lot of great things, and mostly for me and my final thoughts with this is I settled in. I know last time what I discussed with it is that it felt pacing was really slow. I wasn't used to it because most of the Star Wars content, the pacing is not slow. We don't have a lot of time to focus on the character development like the way they did in Star Wars Empire Strikes Back, which was beautifully paced. And this, I've settled in. It feels more like a Western in this episode than it did last episode, which is what everyone's saying. It's a Western, and this one felt much like it. There's a campfire. He's fighting against random enemies while he's transporting this thing. He has his, horse carriage. His ship, has been vandalized. He has to go find the people who took all of his parts, and he's got to go get those parts by doing another task for him. It's very much like a video game where you're doing side quests all the time.
Yeah.
And I absolutely loved that idea that he always has to do something, and we didn't get a lot of exposition in this episode, which doesn't upset me. This is just us getting a better idea of his abilities, his tenacity, and for the most part, how he develops relationships with other people. Because he didn't go up to the Jawas and yell, "Stop! Stop! Give me my ship back!" He just started lighting them up.
Yeah.
He there was no moment of negotiation until Nick Nolte's Ugnaught said, "We need to negotiate," and he's like, they really don't like you," and he's like, "I disintegrated a few of them." But we also get a sense of his culture. Mm-hmm. He says, "This is my religion. I always have to have a weapon on him." So we're also getting to see him be vulnerable and doing things he's not used to. So we're already getting that character development of when Werner Herzog's character in the beginning said, "You were the best in the parsec." You see now in this episode too that he's trying to be the best in the parsec. He's trying to be his normal self, but he has to be a little bit different to mess with the beats.
Yeah.
And I really enjoy that juxtaposition of what we were given in episode 1 versus episode 2.
Yeah, and I guess one of my final thoughts is in relation to his reaction to the Baby Yoda's force powers.
Oh, and that's so good.
Which he doesn't know what to think. He's trying to explain it to the Ugnaught, and he can't. The Ugnaught doesn't fully understand what's going on. And to me, just thinking about it more, it really makes sense because when you look at the prequel trilogy with all the Jedi and the Sith, there was so much rampant use of the Force in so many different places that, of course, it's much more well known. It's such a widespread thing. But then even when you get to the original trilogy, you see the way that Vader's generals are reacting to him talking about the Force, and that basically it's just a wives' tale. Like, what are you? You're a wizard. Like, what are you doing here? It's nothing.
That old religion you hold on to.
Exactly. And then for them to see it in action, they're much more shocked. So even by the time we get to episode 4, there is such much less use of the Force in general that, of course, it's becoming more legendary. It's not really known as this thing that truly exists. It's much more of a wives' tale. So it makes sense to me that at this point, which is set 9 years, I believe, after the events of episode 6.
So they're saying 5 years definitely after Return of the Jedi.
Okay.
And between
The Battle of Yavin.
Between the Battle of Yavin and Empire Strikes Back, people are like, is it 5 years? Is it 6 years? Which then immediately go, and you also have Return of the Jedi. Mm-hmm. Like the whole timeline is like 3 years and 3 years, or is it altogether 6 years between, the first movie and the last movie? So roughly what we can say is probably 5 to 6 is what it is from A New Hope through Return of the Jedi. So let's say 10 to 11 years, 10 years probably being the best.
Yeah.
Of how long it's been since, I don't know where I was going with that.
Yeah, so even just after that short, brief period of time, when you have Luke Skywalker and Vader, and the Emperor using the Force to now go,
it's been 5 years.
Yeah, so even to go into the Outer Rim like this is set in, and to go into these territories that aren't really as well traversed, especially by the main characters of the Star Wars universe.
Oh yeah.
For them to not fully understand what the Force is to me completely believable and practical, and I think it would make less sense if everyone completely understood the Force, no matter where they were, no matter how long it's been. So I really appreciated the fact that this was kind of a nod to that, and that it set that tone for the story of these people don't know what the Force is, and then to see the rest of the characters that we're going to be introduced to later on interact to that, I think is going to be really interesting.
I'm more shocked by that idea because it's 30 years from the time that Revenge of the Sith ends, or all the Execute Order 66, all the Jedi die. It takes probably roughly around 30 years to when we get to The Mandalorian, because, let's say it takes 19 years to get through Luke's journey.
Yeah.
Or to get to Luke to start with. And then you've got, the 6 years that is in the original trilogy, and then 5 years is The Mandalorian afterwards. So 30 years roughly. And people forgot the Force. I think that, for me, I'm enjoying it more because it's like we're rediscovering the Force. But I'm also shocked that there are characters that don't bring up, like, what was that? No one says, like, was that the Force? No one knows what it is. I'm kind of shocked that they did that, but I think I'm going to appreciate it more in the long run, because now we're getting to see characters in this universe who've never seen this.
Yeah.
And it's like us when we watch the movies for the first time, like as little kids, like, what is the Force? And I really love that flipping it on its head. It's like, this is the universe without the Force, and now we're going to introduce this super god baby that can use it but doesn't know how to, doesn't explain to them, and they have to figure it out.
And then for them to go like all of these events like we're talking about to then The Force Awakens in that time period, it's setting up a period where we know that the Force, by the events of The Force Awakens, that the universe as a whole does not remember the Force, and it is basically on the back burner of people's memories. They don't understand it, kind of like these characters now. So we know that this character, the Baby Yoda, isn't going to become this major player down the road that is this huge Force user that becomes super well known. We know that that's just not going to happen, because otherwise they would have mentioned that in The Force Awakens. But yeah, so it's interesting that it's a self-contained story in the part of the universe we haven't seen. telling stories from a perspective, like you said, that we were seeing the Star Wars movies for the first time and really starting to understand and learn about the different aspects of the Jedi and the Sith.
Yeah, and it very much feels like that. It's very relatable in that aspect. And before we head on out on the review, I just want to get your thoughts on what I'm about to say, which is, after this episode, I was like, I want the rest right now and want to binge this so bad.
Yeah.
Like, this episode as a whole grabbed me a lot better than the end of the pilot episode, episode 1. So I'm all in. I'm all ready. I'm so excited to see what happens next. I'm amped. And I was wondering, do you feel like you want to binge this really badly?
Well, I mean, I think I would want to binge it just because that's the culture I'm a part of now.
Oh.
And I binge everything. I definitely, I mean, I would watch the rest of the series right now if I could. But I like that we have to wait a little bit, and that, because I rewatched it again today, and even the second time around, it was still enjoyable. And I think it's got a bit more of a rewatchable quality than I initially realized. So I'm a little upset about the wait because I want to see it right now.
Yeah,
but
absolutely.
It also makes me appreciate it more, and that it draws that interest, and it's paying off the reward for the wait as well. And I can't wait to see how it's going to do that later on too.
Yeah. So as you can tell, everyone, we are both excited to get going again on the next episode. So tune in next week. We'll have another review for episode 3. We'll also have another podcast up, and we'll also be trying something a little bit different. So we'd love your feedback on that extra bit of content. So we will see you next week.
All right. Have a great one.
Have a great one. Bye.
Bye.